Hi, it's Rob and Danielle here from Black Rock Castle Observatory, and we are on our second podcast episode. Are you so excited, Rob?
Beyond excited. I'm trying not to pee myself.
Rob! That's a level of excitement I didn't know we would get to. This week, we've been chatting a little bit about, we got some news in our lovely work group chat where we share all of our space info, that a mission was canceled. And this one is a little bit near and dear to our hearts, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I'm shocked, to be honest with you, that this was called. Nobody could have predicted this. I mean, if billionaires making plans and then cancelling them, I mean, if
Rob,
you can't trust billionaires, who can you trust? You know?
Little sarcasm, Rob? A little bit, maybe?
No, not at all. I'm completely sincere in my love of space billionaires. I think they're the best thing to ever happen to space exploration.
Oh, okay, great. We're going to get into that then.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the Dear Moon mission, which I actually think is a slightly different opinion to you on this mission. I do see the value in it, and I have to say, yeah, I'm not really that shocked. Like the news was, so when I got the news, it was more of a, oh man, really, that's too bad. But it wasn't like an, oh my God, I can't believe it. What was your reaction when you saw the article?
I just wasn't surprised at all. I mean, I felt like from the day it was announced, it was never going to happen.
Really?
I really think we've been consistently overstating how much, private individuals are going to so-called democratize space. I really just don't see that as something that they're actually doing. And I think we need to be a little bit more reticent to give them coverage in media when they announce that they're going to do this stuff. I mean, he announced that he was going to be bringing 8 artists to the moon back in 2018, and he's been writing on that positive PR for the better part of 6 years now, only to leave those artists high and dry. Like the artists themselves were quite shocked by the news. Some of them clearly weren't very well communicated with about the cancellation. And to be honest with you, it sounds like they've been caught off guard, that they haven't been communicated with effectively, and that they've been kind of used, in my opinion, to generate some positive PR for these billionaires.
Do you think when Yusaku started this mission, do you honestly think that he started this thinking, I'm just going to get into it for a bit of publicity and then it probably is not going to go anywhere?
No, I don't necessarily think that he went in with that complete level of malicious intent, but I think there is a flippancy when you are that wealthy and kind of disconnected from the reality of what it's like to be a person who's trying to struggle on a normal person's wage, that I'm going to announce this big thing and I'm going to do it. And you may get bored very quickly. And when you're in a position like that, a lot of people don't be saying yes to it. Well, that's something that needs to be edited. When you're in positions like that, you don't hear no very often. People keep saying yes to you all the time. They think, yeah, you can do this, and there's like this kind of assumption that money will just generate outcome. But it kind of leaves behind the people that are being dragged. Like, I must say, the idea of the mission is fantastic. Yes, we should bring artists to space.
Yeah, let's
100%.
dig into that a little bit before we go any further. For people who don't understand what we're talking about and what Dear Moon is, it was this a Japanese billionaire who he had this great idea of taking a private mission to the moon. And instead of, because other billionaires have gone into space and they paid their way, they just go up and then they've gone up to the International Space Station. But what he wanted to do was to bring artists into space. So it did seem more, I guess, less selfish. In my opinion, it felt like it wasn't like, I'm just going to have all this money and I'm going to go out to the moon. It was, let's take these artists with us on this mission with this intention of when they get out to space, like artists are the ones that here on Earth are able to put things into different perspectives that maybe we wouldn't see ourselves. So having artists go out into space, they'd be able to take it in and describe what it is like to actually be out there and actually being on the moon in maybe a more poetic way than how the Apollo astronauts did, or just the Apollo astronauts. So at its core sounds like an incredible initiative that doesn't sound on the surface very selfish. It sounded like it was something bigger than this. And it has been what, it's it's been going on 6 years or something along those lines.
Since 2018, yeah.
Yeah. In the realm of like space missions, actually it's not been that long, but if you're not somebody who's training to be an astronaut, if you are an artist waiting to go on this is a long process. This is a really long process. And these people are active art. Like Steve Aoki is this massive DJ who's doing tours and everything. And imagine trying to plan your actual life around, I'm going to be touring or possibly going to the moon. Like that's going to be really difficult to do. So what I had read was that he just felt like he couldn't put this off any longer, basically based on what the artists, dragging them along through this because it was taking longer than it was supposed to. He signed this contract in 2018 with the intention of, I think he expected it would be a 5-year mission. I think it was supposed to be 2023. It was supposed to launch by 2023. He assumed
it was late 2023, maybe 2024 at the latest. And you know that is a generous interpretation of how he's decided to pull his funding. Another artist that was supposed to go on this mission was Rhiannon Adam, who was actually an Irish photographer, and her reaction didn't gel with that at all. Like she felt like she took to Twitter, or X as I'm supposed to call it now, to voice their dissatisfaction, saying, you know, that the artists weren't well communicated with, that they had no problem waiting if needs be, and that it's been a kind of a very disparate relationship where the artists today have been expected to prioritize the mission and put the mission first. You know, so very often they're, you know, expected to be in the press corps at mission launches, etc. So they've been putting their lives on hold for several years now on the assumption that this is going to be something that they get to do. And for them to very quickly be told, oh yeah, it's not going to happen. Yeah. Her interpretation seemed to be that, look, a billionaire got bored and got tired of waiting and he's after pulling the plug. He's just changed his mind. And I can kind of see that perspective. Now she does seem quite hopeful that, you know, there is still a future out there where, you know, private missions to the moon will bring artists up, because we all know it. Space missions never happen on time. There's always some bit of a delay. You know, we've been seeing accounts of, you know, I think was it Artemis was meant to be happening later this year, and it's now been put off by like a year or something. I can't remember exactly, but it's just the norm that a mission will get delayed by a little while.
It is, and especially a long-term mission like Artemis. Artemis is it's not a once-off going into space or even just low Earth orbit and then coming back down. This is a big mission, and Starship is part of that mission. And I think for people who are in the world of going into space and people who are astronauts and engineers and people who are working on these missions, that is the norm for them. But is it okay to expect normal people, regular, everyday people who aren't astronauts, people who are artists and musicians and writers and poets and things, is it okay to just expect that they'll put their life on hold, or do they know this going into it? Are they signing up for it knowing this is going to be it, and I'm just going to have to, because it is. Listen, you're putting your life on hold. If it were just like you're waiting for a plumber to come over, plumber just came to me because I have a lake in my house at the moment. So this is just what I'm dealing with. And he hasn't called me today. So I am here putting my life on hold, hoping he doesn't call me in the middle of this podcast. That's inconvenient. But if it was, I'm waiting for a call to go to the moon, am I like, I don't care at all costs. I'm just, what would you do? Would you go to the moon, Rob? If they gave you, if you were given an opportunity, if this guy had come to you and said, Rob, I've never heard anyone describe anything the way you describe it. I've listened to all of your things on the internet and all of your writings about space. You're incredible. I want you on the rocket going to the moon. Would you go?
Not on Elon Musk's rocket. No.
Well, why, Rob? We just watched it just a few minutes ago. It was successful. Now, it didn't land where it was supposed to, but it was the most successful so far. 4th launch of Starship. Yeah,
that's so far though is doing a lot of heavy lifting work there. It's a topic for another day, but no, I'm not opposed to the idea, and I think giving the average Joe's access to space is a good long-term goal. But I don't think capitalists offering lotteries to bring, a lucky few into space is democratizing space any more than, American Idol is democratizing access to, a music career. It's just a kind of a greenwashing, for lack of a better word, of the disparity that exists there. Like it at the end of the day, it still is only primarily available to the wealthiest among us. The fact that we throw a few token tickets to people that can't otherwise afford them doesn't remove that disparity. To me, true democratization is going to look like maybe not everybody going to space, but more and more of us benefiting from space. So, for instance, a space billionaire that wants to help truly democratize space, that's their goal. They're like, oh, we want to make sure more people have access to space so they can be inspired by it. A much better way to invest their fortune to do that is to, first off, ensure that their companies are accessible places where women, people of color, and people from other minorities have a realistic chance of having a career. They can invest in emergent space economies to ensure that it's not the same countries that are making all the money on the space sector all the time. They can fund public access to, space and science museums like Black Rock Castle Observatory. Anybody out there willing to send that money our way? That's the stuff that, like, for instance, I can play guitar without ever having had to pay for a lesson because libraries give me free access to the information and the tutorials needed. YouTube tutorials give me free access to the material needed. There are rental schemes out there for instruments so that, even people who are not from wealthy backgrounds can afford to borrow an instrument and learn how to play it. That's how you democratize something like music. And it's not to say capitalism doesn't have a role to play in that. My guitar is affordable because it can be mass produced. I'm not like, all capitalism is bad. It has absolutely no role to play up there. But when we put all of our eggs in the capitalism basket, all of the eggs are going to the capitalist. The general public are not going to benefit, in my opinion, from the likes of Elon Musk or Yusaku Maezawa going to space. And even if they do bring artists up there with them, I think they're overstating the aims to an extent, because the Dear Moon mission was supposed to inspire world peace. I don't think, with all the conflicts that are happening around the world right now, any one of them is going to get resolved by knowing that 8 artists were flown up on a billionaire's rocket to go around the moon. I don't want to understate the value that art can play in transforming the public's opinion from space. Like the Apollo 8 mission, I think it was, with that Earthrise photo, did help spark an environmental revolution.
It did. I was going to say, so there, that in and of itself, I mean, you're thinking about that was an unexpected offshoot of what happened in that mission. That we didn't go up there on Apollo 8 to go, do you know what? We want people to look at the Earth as a blue marble and appreciate where they are and how fragile it is. But that is what happened, and it happened from an artistic standpoint because it was a photograph that did it. It wasn't people coming back and describing it. Now, maybe if it was a poet or a singer, that would have been more impactful if they were to describe it. But it was a photograph that sparked this whole understanding that we have this one fragile little planet. So I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards, I feel like people being able to describe what it's like better than the people that have gone up there. It could have, how do we know? It could spark some kind of other revolution that maybe not entirely world peace, but maybe somebody in charge who is destroying other countries might go, you know what? I'm going to stop doing that because I watched those people go into space and I decided I'm going to choose peace instead. I don't know, Rob.
At the same time, I don't want to say that, artists shouldn't be in space. They absolutely should. I just personally feel NASA, the European Space Agency, the Canadian Space Agency, JAXA, all of these other public efforts in collaboration with private companies should be bringing these people up there. And the public should get because when NASA sends an astronaut up, it's effectively the American people, through a long interconnected process of bureaucracy, deciding who that person is. But it is the people who are funding that mission that are in some way helping to have a say. And it is, in a way, then representative. It is democratizing space a little bit. A capitalist running a competition isn't. It's just, you know, it's a lottery at that point. It doesn't represent the nations that are sending people up, in my opinion, at least. But I do think we should absolutely be spending artists to space. And like my favorite quote from an amazing movie by a genuinely amazing space communicator, Carl Sagan, the movie Contact. There's this moment where Jodie Foster is in space experiencing something just mind-blowing, and she just kind of, her breath is shaking, and she just in a broken way says they should have sent a poet. And I get that, like that is something that we need to be able to do, is to express what's up there in more easy to understand language or more diverse language. You know, I'm not saying that any of the scientists that have gone up there already haven't actually done a great job, because some of them have. Like Carl Sagan was a scientist, but he was one of the most eloquent guys you've ever met in your life. Like the pale blue dot image was a result of Carl Sagan. Again, not a billionaire. He worked with NASA and convinced people through, you know, discussion with a whole bunch of different people, let's turn that camera around and take a picture of Earth, because I know it will be significant, not to science, but to humanity.
Well, just to be clear, he didn't, for anyone who's not familiar with Carl Sagan, he didn't go into space. He worked on missions that went into space. But yeah, he actually had to fight for that image, because that was there were people who felt that that was an absolute waste of resources, and he had to fight to get that image taken. And if anyone has never seen the pale blue dot, Google it, get online and Google this image. And without context, it is kind of like, what am I looking at? It's a really pixelated, it's just like, it's very kind of brownish red, streaks of green and things. But what you're looking at is the Voyager mission. He turned, he had the camera, there was a camera on board, had it turned back towards Earth. So this was traveling out the edge of the solar system and looking back towards Earth, which means it's looking back towards the sun. So what you get is a lens flare from the camera. So you get a sunbeam going through the image, and Earth just happens to be in the middle of that sunbeam, and it's just a tiny little blue dot. And if you don't know what you're looking at, you wouldn't even know that it's Earth. And then he went on this beautiful, beautiful monologue of, if you've never heard the pale blue dot speech given by Carl Sagan, it's out there all over YouTube and everywhere else, and you have to hear him describe this little speck, this blue speck in space. It is actually just an absolutely stunning image. And like I said, when you're looking at it just with no context, it's like, what? It's just like a blurry image. It looks like nothing. But when you hear him explaining what it is, and how fragile Earth really is, it really, really puts a lot of things into context. How big space is, how big our solar system is, how tiny we are. And it is a shame that Carl Sagan never got to go into space. Could you imagine the text, the book? Because he's written some amazing books. I've read a few of his. Could you imagine the books he would have written if he had gone up out to the moon? If he had had the opportunity to go out and around. So I do see the value in sending someone like him out and around on these missions. Maybe it isn't the right way to go about it. Maybe there's a lot of things behind the scenes. I'm not totally opposed to sticking them on. If a billionaire is funding it, sticking them on a rocket and sending them out there. Because I do feel like there will be a lot of benefits that come back from it.
But we did that, and the billionaire cut off the poet midstream when he was talking about how great it was. We sent William Shatner, Captain Kirk, into space, and while he was waxing poetic, Jeff Bezos interrupted him.
It's actually, I remember watching that live, and I was like, did he just like push him out of the way to pop a bottle of champagne? Like, what is happening? It was such a mess. It actually was. Okay, but this now, Rob, I know he's probably
right.
No, yeah, you're right about this. But and I know you're a big Star Trek fan and all of this kind of stuff. And he got to go to space. But did he actually go to space? And did he actually? I mean, that whole side of it just really just gets under my skin a bit because I think it's cool for him. I think it's a fantastic experience for William Shatner. It would have been nice if he got to actually talk about his experience. Just get shoved off screen. But then to stamp astronaut on it, that really gets under my skin. And I actually was wondering about this, how this would have been looked at after, if they went on the Dear Moon mission and they went out and around the moon and came back, would they come back and people would go, oh, look at these astronauts. Steve Aoki is now an astronaut. Rhiannon Adam, she's now an astronaut. Because this is exactly what's happening with the Blue Origin missions. And they're saying that they're going through training. And then once they're finished with their training and they go up past the Kármán line, then they come back and they're officially astronauts. But in my mind, I'm thinking, you and I have met real astronauts, like actually trained astronauts. And I can't put them in the same category.
No, I mean, if I remember correctly, the word astronaut is derived from, was it the Greek or the Latin for astros, star, and naut, meaning sailor or something like that. So that infers like a participation in the sailing rather than being a passenger on the ship.
Yeah.
It is absolutely a really, really cool achievement to go to space and to talk about space and everything. But again, I'm not going to claim I'm a pilot if I've hopped on a plane.
That's
kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
But again, this kind of tangentially relates to what kind of gets my goat about all this space via billionaires thing anyway, is that we're giving them all of this credit and attention for declaring, I'm gonna go do a thing that they never do. And we end up very often doing the same thing for people who say, I'm going to be an astronaut. But again, there's been research since the 20s, and there's a really good TED Talk on this by a guy, I think it's called Derek Sivers, on the psychology of just shutting your mouth about what your ambitions are if you want to achieve them. Because the moment you tell somebody what you're going to do, you get the psychological reward of doing the thing without ever lifting a finger.
Yeah.
And people who tell people what they're going to do, there is a correlation between them not successfully actually going through and doing it relative to people who keep their goals to themselves.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, it's not a causal relationship. My girlfriend has signed me up to do a 10K run, and me telling you about it, unfortunately, isn't getting me out of it. So it's not a direct thing that I can weaponize and use. But there are consistent studies for over 100 years now showing that if you actually do want to do this thing, you should put your mind to doing it and not spend your time talking about it and getting the pats on the back for not actually going about it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's happening in the science communication space with astronauts. It's happening with these billionaires who are going to terraform Mars, or they're going to take us to space, or they're going to make it so easy for, people to go to space, affordably. Until they have shown a capacity to do it, I think we need to stop giving them the kudos for just saying they're going to do it.
There's an old saying that says the best way to write a book is not tell anyone you're going to do it.
That's psychologically a genuinely real effect in the human psyche, that if you tell people about stuff, you're not going to do it.
Yeah, but do you think that would have applied to Dear Moon? Like, if they just said, we're going to get all these people who are, like Steve Aoki, he's famous. He's a big deal. Do you think they would have been better off to just not say anything and like secretly have them planning on going on this thing, going on this mission, and then, I don't know what to call it, a mission project. It was a project. Have him on this project, but then not say anything about it?
I think they shouldn't be talking about the mission until they're ready to commit to the reality of spaceflight. And the reality of spaceflight is there will be delays. If you're going to get upset and need to pull funding after a year of a delay, you're not serious about it. So he shouldn't have been taken seriously if he wasn't able to actually fund and commit to this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's absolutely a reason that, like, we're talking about the Artemis mission before it happens, but because there's a really well-laid plan for it that isn't just some impulsive thing that somebody just, threw down the gauntlet off the top of their head and said, we're going back to the moon, guys. There has been a plan in place for a very long time through successive governments.
There is a plan because it's supposed to be on Starship, and Starship was supposed to be further along than it is. Now, I don't know if he's just forgetting that an entire pandemic happened and like things like metal became very difficult to get. But like, and that's part of the reason some of the other missions have been pushed back. Even for us with telescopes, it took us forever to be able to get telescope equipment. Anybody who owns a telescope or astro cameras or anything will know during that time period, it was very difficult, and it's only just starting to come back around now. So a lot of things are pushed out. So I think it's not that it wasn't planned. This is a ship that is going to be taking people to Mars. This is a ship that is the tallest rocket, the heaviest rocket that's ever been created, ever been built. And it's going to go farther than and take people farther than we've gone before. And so this is not like just a couple of billionaires throwing rockets together and trying to send people off. This is part of the Artemis mission. So if I were a Japanese billionaire, or just a billionaire, not Japanese, if I were a billionaire, I would think if I were going to invest in a project and I know that piece of equipment is tied to a NASA mission, I think I would be thinking this is actually going to happen. This is actually going to make it out to the moon, because this is the rocket that's going to be taking people to as part of the Artemis mission, taking astronauts back to the moon. So I would feel like that's a safe bet. Now, maybe he needed to give it a bit more time. Maybe she's right. Maybe he did just get bored and say, I'm sick of waiting, because like this Starship isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Like this is not something that, because he pulled out, this isn't going to happen. It's not going to get developed. The launch just happened this afternoon. This is still in progress. It's still part of Artemis. It's going to happen. So maybe she's right. Maybe he did just say, do you know what? I'm sick of waiting. Maybe it was just a selfish decision. I just started off this podcast a very different way and ending it very, very differently. I think I'm more confused about how I feel about this.
I really do want to stress that I do think artists should be sent into space. I just think the mechanism for delivering that should be something closer to the traditional space agency approach. Like space agencies should be making room for artists and other representatives of society. Maybe we need to send a couple of politicians up there too. You know, maybe it's not just about scientist first, then artist, then Joe Schmo. Like there's a whole population of like diverse backgrounds and employment types out there that will have their own unique perspective on why being in space is awesome, that they can communicate to their particular demographic. And I think it needs to be more representative up there. I mean, even of the Apollo 11 astronauts, only one of them was actually a proper scientist, a geologist on Apollo 17. All the rest were like test flight pilots, if that's the term.
Yeah, fighter pilots, yeah. Most of them had been trained for war, so and had gone and flown in war, and so most of them had that kind of a background, but it was a very, very different time. You kind of needed those guys because they were the ones that were they looked at life a bit differently, because you had to be a little bit crazy to be going out on these rockets back then. And today it's a much different landscape, and I think maybe that's where the private industry versus government industry is very different, because when you have taxpayer dollars going into government missions, you got to make sure that those rockets are flying. You got to make sure you're not sticking people on those until they are well tested. And this is part of the reason these missions do take so long, because they are, especially when you're talking about human life, you're sending probes out or whatever and going different places. You know, you crash something into the surface of the moon. Yeah, there's repercussions, but you're not losing lives. It's not the end of the world. Tardigrades smashed on the surface. I feel bad for the tardigrades, but you know what? No one died. And they probably are still surviving and thriving up there the way those things are built. But but when it's putting people on it, it's a very different thing. So with private industry, they don't have to jump through as many hoops. So it is, for me, real risky. I think I wouldn't be getting on a private rocket anytime soon, because they don't have the kind of skin in the game. If a billionaire blows up a bunch of people on a rocket, then, that's sad, but they'll just build another rocket. Where if the government blows up a rocket with people on it, they have to they have people to account for. They have people to answer to. Like the taxpayers have paid for that. So it's a very different kind of landscape. But I do see how one can work well with the other, because since when you have different pieces of equipment that can be built faster and maybe cheaper privately, and then used in government missions that are then tested, and you can have them kind of working on the side to build these parts for you and things. That's great. But I think there's a balance there between going private and having a government funded missions as well. Now, a fully private mission, I find that a bit, let's go in a submarine to the bottom of the ocean kind of vibe. It scares me a little bit. Kind of same vibe going into space.
These guys and their capacity to declare stuff without actually demonstrating any, like actually doing it, I really think needs to be taken with more of a pinch of salt. Like we've seen it consistently, people saying, oh, I'm going to do X and then canceling after X number of years. Or the Boring Company, we're going to deliver, I think it was something like 60 miles of underground tunnels where you can drive at 150 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it at a rate of like, I think it was a mile a week or something like that. Mm-hmm. And 7 years later, they were 2.5 miles in and you can only drive at 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You know, like declaring what you're going to do isn't in and of itself a certainty that it's going to happen. And I think we need to stop reporting on it in this kind of, we are going to Mars. We are going to solve all future problems with technology. We might come up with some solutions based on that stuff. I don't doubt we'll eventually get to Mars, but I don't like the definitive statement of Company X will bring us to Mars by whatever date. Mm-hmm. Because time and time again, we've shown that no, they won't.
He was it Mars 2024? It was supposed to be. I think that was the whole thing. We're going to get there by 2024. That didn't happen. But yeah, I think that is the big thing with when you have the government versus private. The government has to report back to people. It's people. So you have people that are there holding these missions accountable, the general public, because they're funding it, where with private industry, not so much. They don't really have anybody to report back to. So it's an interesting time in space, and it's interesting to see where we're going to go. I think we'll go to Mars, Rob. I don't know about you, but I'm not planning on going. I know how long that journey is. I'm not up for it. But I am actually, do you know what? Do you remember, was it Mars 1, I think it was called? Do you remember that?
Yeah, vague recollection, yeah.
And they were looking for people to go, and same thing, people had signed up for this mission, and they were average people, and they were going to train for it. And I remember looking into it because at that time I was kind of moving around and I wasn't settled anywhere, and I was going from country to country, and I thought, oh my God, I could do this, because the people that they were looking for were people that didn't have like a strong tie to their home country, and they like to explore, and they're adaptable and all. It's like, I was reading through the requirements thinking like, yeah, I could do this. That was a one-way ticket as well. And at the time I was like, do you know what? But I get to go to Mars. And now like, oh, what a young brain would do. It's actually not even that long ago. It's probably what, eight years ago. And I was like, yeah, I'll get on a rocket to Mars one way. Sounds amazing. What was I going to do when I got there? Since then, after speaking to multiple astronauts and even just what they have to go through to get up to the International Space Station, I'm not really in a rush to go to space. I'll say that much. Even private rocket, NASA, European Space Agency, I think it'd be amazing to go out there. It'd be amazing to see the Earth from space. I love space, but I also love to be able to breathe air. You know, that's kind of a really cool thing to do. Walk around outside without wearing a jacket. Oh, I live in Ireland. It's been like a really wet year, so I don't know, walking around without a jacket. At this point, maybe I'm more prepped to be an astronaut than I think. Anyways, Rob, any final thoughts?
Any final thoughts? I will say, I have been in the past more reserved in my criticism of the public versus private debate, because I was under the impression that it doesn't really matter how somebody's inspired to go to space, and you don't want to like, you know, pull the wind out from under their sails. If they are excited because of an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos or whatever, it's not my idea of ideal, but it's a spark, and if hopefully you hope they'll find their direction later. Whereas I've seen just too many examples in the last couple of years even where these guys have proven to be less than ideal role models. And I think that on the whole, the disappointment associated with this private drive for space is going to do more damage to science communication and getting people enthusiastic about space than it'll do good. Or at least there's a risk of that. And it is a real shame that we are not going to have artists in space now, because like we said, like Carl Sagan and the pale blue dot, he didn't even have to go to space. Like, you don't have to go to space to be moved by space. Like, artists do have that capacity to convey things and to make change, and the idea of looking back at the planet as like a unifying experience is very real. And we've seen examples of countless people who were inspired by Carl Sagan. Even I mentioned Captain Kirk, you know, and Star Trek. Watching people back in the 60s travel through space at a time when there was still segregation and, you know, civil rights issues, they saw Nichelle Nichols as uhura on the bridge of the Enterprise. They saw women interacting with men on the bridge of the Enterprise. Martin Luther King asked Nichelle Nichols not to leave the show because this idea of seeing a black woman being part of a space mission, even if it was a fictional one, and showing that, you know, an example of how people have been moved by that unity in space, was a positive force for change. And it has been. Like, there's been so many people who have been inspired to become scientists because of Star Trek. Many people have become paleontologists because of Jurassic Park. You know, fiction can and art can move people and inspire people to do great things, which is why we do need artists up there to get that inspiration and come back and tell us amazing stories and tell us what, you know, because even if they're not going to create world peace, maybe they can move each of us individually on a level that improves an individual life, and collectively that might mean something.
Yeah, I think that I'm kind of on the same page. I do see a real value in sending artists and musicians and poets and everybody, maybe not everybody, or maybe some people can go on one-way tickets out into space.
Which artist are you sending? You get to send one artist up. Who are you sending?
Alive or dead?
Well, I feel like if you send a dead person, there's been plenty of dead artists sent into space. James Doohan was one of them, actually. Scotty from Star Trek. But I feel like they're probably going to do more good if you bring them back alive.
One artist to send to space. Actually, do you know who I would send? John Mayer. Send John Mayer to space. Not on a one-way ticket. Bring that man back. He is a gift. He does have a very strong objection to gravity, so. Ooh, good one, Rob. No, he just has a way of, well, he's a fantastic guitar player, so you get that. But then also he really is, he just has a way with words. He really is good at taking a moment and describing, like, making things really simple and nostalgic at the same time. And I think he's able to connect with the human experience. So he makes things really timeless when he's writing his music and things. Everything, I can go back and listen to his albums from the beginning, and the lyrics in those songs from 2001 still apply today. He's very good at making things relatable, and doesn't even matter what age you are. Because I was listening to his stuff when I was 15, 16, and now I can go back and listen to those same songs again and at this age, and they still relate, but even in a different way. And I think someone like that has a way that he would be able to capture the experience of being in space, that people 80 years from now could read those lyrics or sing those lyrics and then go, wow, yeah, that's kind of amazing. So he would be able to describe it really well. I I don't know, you put me on the spot there, but I feel like that's still a really good choice. John Mayer, yeah, he's just great. Who would you send?
Owen Wilson. I just feel like put him up there blindfolded and take the blindfold off, make him look out because that Owen Wilson, wow, would just be great to like.
Stop it. Could you imagine the memes? Imagine the memes. Oh my God. Owen Wilson. All right. Okay, well, I think this podcast has just taken a turn, so I think we'll just end it there. It's been an interesting topic. It is a bit hard. The way I felt about this when I saw it was that it was heartbreaking. I'm heartbroken for the people that were really excited to go into space and didn't get an opportunity to. And I think if it were something that was such a part of your life for 5 years in any capacity, it doesn't even matter if it was going to the moon, and that's what you're thinking about. And then you're telling your friends and your family and everything else, and you're mentally preparing for that trip. And that's what you've been living with for so long. And to have that taken away, I think I'm just, regardless of any politics or private, public sector or whatever, I'm actually just heartbroken for those people that should have been a part of that mission. And I'm hopeful that maybe something else will come up. Maybe somebody else, another billionaire, will be inspired by this and go, you know what? I'm going to put my money for it. I'm going to take that same group of people and I'm going to stick it out and wait until the Starship is ready to go and fund them to go into space, because I would love to see these people go, considering they've been living with this for so long. So yeah, that's my final thoughts on it. So I think we'll just leave it there. And if anyone has, please, any commentary you have about this, if you've never even heard of the Dear Moon mission, check it out. And if you have opinions on it, please comment all over in the comment section. We'd love to hear what you think about this. If you have opinions about private versus public or where we should be going with it, yeah, let us know. We're
Tell
really
us which artist you want to send in space.
Absolutely. I'm actually really curious, because now that I got me thinking about that, I'm going to think about it for the rest of the week. So maybe next week I'll come back with a better answer. Let us know what you think in the comments below. You can check us out on Spotify as well, and of course on YouTube. And if you have any questions, you can get in touch with us through the Black Rock Castle Observatory social media platforms. We're all over there. We are on, I'm going to say Twitter, but X, Facebook, Instagram. We're all over there. So check us out and get in touch, and we'd love to hear from you. So thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Bye.